At the moment I'm in Donegal and I'm writing a book. This is how I do it. I try and find somewhere where I'm isolated and I can be on my own, and then I write. And I suppose one of the reasons I'm in Donegal is because I can't be in Warsaw. I used to go to Warsaw every year to do a big length of writing where I would be alone. And I'm going to share a little piece. It's from the book Chest Pain, which I wrote in 2019. And walking the streets of Warsaw at 64 years of age, alone for an entire month in winter, hadn't seemed like the fulfillment of happiness. It had felt like the opposite, like everything I had been and hoped for was dead. And I'd walked so much during the first week that my left leg had gone numb right down my thigh. It had worried me, so I asked my friend, Dr. Google, what it could mean. Cause of numb leg, I typed in the search space, and I got 500,000 options for answers. According to Dr. Google, tight underpants might cause severe numbness in the leg. So clearly I had found the problem. It was tight trousers. I went out and bought an enormous pair of trousers, a waist size of 45, and an extra large underpants, although when I returned to the apartment and tried on the new clothes for an hour or two, my leg was even worse. I lay on the bed for 2 days to rest it, until the numbness began to thaw and the sensation returned. I ventured out again, though it was -2 on the streets, and sleet was sweeping across the parks and pavements, leaving a white sheen on the world like scattered salt. My trousers were so loose that my underpants fell down inside my trousers. I bought a tin of tomato soup at a nearby shop, returned to the apartment, undressed, and felt the leg. It was still numb, and so I faced another day or two indoors. I opened my Kindle and downloaded the Philokalia, a complete compendium of writings from the early Desert Fathers. I had heard that Evagrius, a monk in the 4th century, was worth studying on the subject of despondency. In desperation, I began to trust old monks and ancient mystics, and a multitude of orthodox Christian websites, rather than Google, despite their flowery language and propensity to blame all ailments on demons rather than scientific or medical diagnosis. But I still really admired the guys in the desert and the women in the desert, those solitary explorers of the inner mind who lived in the deserts and in caves or on wild cliff-edge monasteries on the west coast of Ireland, before modern psychiatry was invented, spoke in a poetic language that drew me in, phrase by phrase and word by word. The word kiss had a beautiful significance in the flowery language of that ancient religion. A kiss was not just a kiss. It could be a metaphor. The entire world was described by ancient mystics as a kiss. It was where the invisible world touched this world. A kiss was nothing in itself. It was what two people did, and it was how they connected. Similarly, the earth itself was not substantial. It was more like a veil, and the point at which the ancient monk engaged with it could be described as a kiss. It was a point of exquisitely beautiful connection between the little monk there in the desert, who viewed the world, and the mysterious other behind the veil, who in the eternity of that moment was touching the surface of things as intimately as a lover. Florid ideas, but in the face of a numb leg, they calmed me down. And when the leg had improved, those ideas had kept me going for hours, as I wandered aimlessly around Warsaw without knowing where I was heading, but that I was in the slipstream of my own devotional fervour, a kind of heat in the heart that kept me walking. At the junction of every new street, I wondered where I might end up. I felt I was not unlike a 7th century monk who might sit in a boat with his oars up and wait for the tide to take him where the tide wished. One day I bumped into 5 nuns, huddled together on a street outside a restaurant. I gawked at them because even in Warsaw, a city of strong religious orthodoxies and well-regulated religious life, nuns have become as scarce as hen's teeth, and are not as often seen in public as they were in the old days. Whenever I did notice one flapping in her black robes, or gleaming like a beacon on the street corner with a white veil, I tended to follow behind them out of curiosity, and I suppose an unconscious yearning to belong in their world of gentle certainty. These 5 nuns were huddled in a circle. 3 of them were elderly but sprightly and thin, like nuns are supposed to be, and the other 2 were young and plump. The older ones were in black, from their covered heads to their sandalled toes. One of the young ones had a long black habit, but she wore no veil, and I guessed she might be a novice. Her cheeks were flushed, and she bubbled with rustic cheerfulness. But the other young nun, also in a long black robe, wore a white veil and had a guitar case strapped on her back and her face tilted to one side like she was yearning for something. I couldn't stop wondering what might be in her heart. Perhaps she dreamed of being in a folk group. Perhaps she was lonely. Perhaps the guitar and the quiet longing in her eyes revealed some disappointment in her life. Maybe she was in despair and didn't actually believe in Christ or God at all. Maybe she regretted all the human intimacy that she had abandoned the day she robed herself in black. If that were the case, then her struggle was no more tragic than mine. Because deep down, all my life, my relationships with the saints in Egyptian deserts, the angels in heaven, and even Christ himself, who stood just beyond my fingertips when I surfed on Orthodox websites, didn't imply any religious convictions in the traditional sense. I knew from having to survive alone with a sore leg that believing in any magic is beneficial if it gets the person through the day. Faith, for me, was always a survival mechanism, and besides, most spiritual paths conclude in disappointment, if not sorrow. Maybe the young nun should try Buddhism, I thought. It's not so much a religion as a psychotherapy, and it doesn't disappoint as much as Christianity because it doesn't offer as much. The truth is that I'd sell Buddhism to the cats if I could. In fact, I did try once at home when I was idle and had nobody to talk to, only my little furry companion. When the beloved was away, and the sleet was falling on the roof, and the little pot-bellied stove was crackling with logs, and the cat was curled up on a sofa, staring at me like a grumpy monk who would fall into a deep and fantastical relationship. "I want chicken," the cat declared. "You're not getting chicken," I replied. "But your beloved gives me chicken," the cat protested. So I corrected him. "She gives you the skin of the chicken." He rolled on his side, turned his backside and the remnants of his testicles towards my face, and stared at the flames in the stove. Well, that's me and the old religion. But in Warsaw, I definitely, on a particular winter, 2018, began to feel that I was being drawn deeply into the Christian tradition once more. And looking back on it, I think it was because my leg was going numb. Now, what happened later seemed to explain everything. I had a heart attack. So in Warsaw, I didn't know I was going to have a heart attack. But the sense of something being wrong physically was always with me, and in some way I was reaching out for support, and I was reaching out for religion. I was falling back on religion. This is how the heart attack happened. I phoned 999 from my hotel room. I asked for an ambulance and gave my room number. But I forgot to alert hotel reception. So when an ambulance arrived and the hotel staff knew nothing about it, there was confusion. The paramedics told the receptionist that the call had come from room 725. The phone beside my bed rang. "Good morning, sir," the receptionist said. "Did you order an ambulance?" I wanted to say, "No, I ordered poached eggs," but the tension at the reception desk might have been exasperated if I had tried to be funny. The hotel manager wanted to find out what had happened in room 725, so he came up in the lift with the paramedics. Moments later, two young men in high-visibility jackets were standing over me with aspirin and other tablets as I lay stretched on the bed. The hotel manager remained at the door. A mother and daughter pushing suitcases along the corridor stopped to gawk until the manager discreetly closed the door. One paramedic handed me a tablet. "Don't swallow," he said. "Chew it first." I chewed like a dog with a morsel of bone. For some reason, I was talking to myself. "Apparently Robert Lowell died in a taxi," I declared. The paramedics didn't hear me. They wheeled me to the lift, down to the foyer and out the front door into the back of an ambulance. I've seen a lot of ambulances taking people away from supermarkets, public houses, and hotel foyers. It's always the same. The ambulance arrives and the blue light spins. Another casualty of life is wheeled to the waiting vehicle. The back doors are slammed shut and the ambulance screams away into the traffic. But now it was me in the lead role. "I'm sorry to have bothered you," I said to the paramedic as we sped through the traffic lights and crisscrossed Blanchardstown. "It was just indigestion," I suggested. He smiled. "We'll be there in a minute," he said. And we were. And for a few hours my life, as they say, was in their hands. I remember waking in the night and seeing a nurse staring into my eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked. Her oval face and brown skin were lit by almond eyes. "Where are you from?" I wondered. "India," she said. "Am I dreaming?" I wondered. "No," she said. "You just had a heart attack. Tomorrow the consultant will put in a stent. There's nothing to worry about." Which wasn't exactly true. I was worried that I might need to use the toilet. "We can get you a bedpan if you need one," she said. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. The stent was inserted the following afternoon, a near miraculous procedure whereby a scaffolding is placed inside the clogged artery to allow a free flow of blood. The procedure was executed with precision by the dexterous hands and eyes of a heart surgeon, who spoke gently to me as I lay on the table before him. For some reason I got the notion that he might be from Kerry, and so, considering the masterful precision and dexterity of that county's champions in both football and dancing, it seemed reasonable to believe that a Kerry man would excel equally well at heart surgery. I tried without success to engage him in conversation about Skellig Michael, Orthodox monks, and Kerry dancers. As I lay flat and almost naked on his table with a gigantic television screen above my head and various people in eggshell blue uniforms moving about the operating room. When I was young, a heart attack often signified sudden death, somewhere casual, like the 9th green of the golf club. And surgery, when required, left scars from the neck to the belly button. Men wandered the hospital corridors in dressing gowns with despairing faces in dreadful pain. So I was lucky, and I was full of gratitude. I wanted to hug the entire hospital and everyone in it. It was the 9th of December. And the heart attack is what I presumed had caused the numbness in my legs when I was in Warsaw the year before. And I began to see that my attraction to the Christian religion, and particularly to orthodoxy, had been caused by a sort of unconscious anxiety about death, which was sort of murmuring inside me, but I didn't know what it was. And then when the heart attack happened, it was like, well, that's what it's about. And there was one other thing about the heart attack that I couldn't resist because I'm a poet. I like the serendipity of life. I like the significance, how things happen in patterns. And the fact of the matter was that the heart attack happened at 9 o'clock on the morning of the 8th of December. And the 8th of December was a religious feast. On the 8th of December, when I was a child, everything closed down and we all went to Dublin in an Austin A40. It was the only possibility of meeting Santa Claus face to face and whispering into his ear the thing that I wanted for Christmas. The postal service in Cavan was a pure cod. That's what my mother often said when the Christmas cards arrived on the 2nd day of January. I used to drop my letter for Santa in the post box outside the market square, but that was usually a day or two before Christmas Eve. So no one could convince me that a letter with no address would ever get to the North Pole. Dublin was the only chance to get a word in Santa's ear, just after Mammy had completed her quest for the fabled Hafner's sausages and white puddings that were so essential in her turkey stuffing. After that, we'd head over to see the fat man with the white beard in his red dressing gown in Arnott's. Mammy seemed to swallow the performance hook, line and sinker, so I usually ignored the fact that Santa's arse could hardly contain itself on the chair he was sitting on, never mind trying to manoeuvre it down our chimney, even if there wasn't a coal fire burning in the grate below. Simply put, this was a fake Santa, no matter how many adults believed him. But I didn't want to be the one to tell Mammy. In my letter that year, I said I wanted a bicycle. I was too old for teddies, so I asked for a rally. But in the ear of the beardy man at Santa's grotto, I opted for the teddy. I told him I'd love another cuddly bear. It was a bicycle that arrived in the yard on Christmas morning, certain proof, my mother asserted, that Santa had received the letter. He couldn't get it down the chimney, Mamma explained, although I noticed that he couldn't manage to tear the price docket off the front wheel either. After that, I was sceptical about Christmas for a few years, but when I was 13, I found some kind of enlightenment. That year, I carried the Virgin Mary, with the aid of another altar boy, from the sacristy across the sanctuary to the crib. She was as big as either of us. But when we saw Mary Brady, a skinny girl in a Loretta uniform, lighting a candle, my friend said, "There's that one from Stradone." And when I turned to gawk, I slipped on the sanctuary steps, and the Mother of God went skidding across the marble floor. Fortunately, there were only a few scratches on her fingers, so we picked her up and got her into the manger with her eyes focused on the baby Jesus and her hands joined. When the people gathered around the crib that Christmas night, I was terrified someone might notice the damage. The bishop, an old man with enormous eyebrows, gave the crib a skite of holy water. Drops landed on Mary's face, and I feared the congregation would see the scratches on her fingers due to our wanton sexual desires for Mary Brady. I knew it was only a statue, and a few scratches to the fingers of a porcelain virgin was hardly going to alter the direction of the universe. And yet all the people blessed themselves and prayed with closed eyes, "Hail Mary, full of grace," as if she were of flesh and blood, and kneeling there before them in the straw. The real Mary, I concluded, must indeed be hiding behind the image and orchestrating the universe's pulse to suit me. And the real Christ must be hidden behind the garish baby in the straw. The light was hidden in the darkness, as old Bishop Eyebrows used to say in his sermon. But my real enlightenment related to Santa. I concluded that was real. And perhaps behind the sham of gaudy rituals, in which men with white curly beards and red dressing gowns posed for pictures with frightened infants, there might be a deeper secret, that of infinite generosity. All the gaudy Santas in department stores and village halls were only there to comfort adults who could no longer accept the possibility of the invisible made visible. And I'll finish with a description. It's from the book Chest Pain again, but it's a description of doing the pilgrimage, the Taurus, around Glencollamkill, which I did 2 years ago this weekend. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I'll read you a little bit of that if I can find it, if that's okay. We arrived in Glencollamkill and we parked on a hill overlooking the village, a viewing area with wooden seats and benches. And we went to sleep with the bay and the cliffs all around us, the roofs of the church and the houses below us in the valley. The pilgrimage began the following afternoon, the 9th of June, from near the Church of Ireland just before 1 o'clock. It took 4 hours to complete the path, in the company of a few women and men from the parish, a couple from the south of France, another couple from Dublin, and, of course, my beloved, stopping along the way at various standing stones, and at an old monastic site and a holy well halfway up the side of the mountain. The sky was blue above the Church of Ireland, an elegant building shining at the centre of the valley, beside a megalithic tomb and a standing stone from pre-Christian times. In fact, many of the standing stones along the path date back to a prehistoric era, long before Columkill set his eyes on the waves at Glen Bay. Etching Christian crosses on standing stones that were already old, even in the 6th century, was an intelligent way of rebranding old truths. Although nowadays it's entirely the memory of Columkill that haunts the valley. Halfway up the side of a mountain, we stopped at the ruined walls of a church, and after circling the building 3 times, I went inside and lay down on a slab known as Labby Columkille. I turned over 3 times, and then lifted a handful of clay from beneath the stone, which I'm told can protect a house from fire. When I was done, the other pilgrims performed the same ritual. "It's better than house insurance," a man said, as he folded the black crumbs into an envelope and dropped them gently into his breast pocket. By the time we got to the holy well, I had grown as devout as a Russian nun, and I scooped a full bottle of water from the well to take home with me, promising to distribute it drop by drop to the neighbours. We all sat down and drank bottled water and ate egg sandwiches, and one man told us a story. Once upon a time, he said, Columkill had a stone chalice no bigger than a child's heart, and by drinking from it a person could be cured of anything, the gout within or the gout without, the broken head or the broken heart. For centuries, the women of Torrey Island were the keepers of this chalice, until it was pilfered by fishermen from Scotland. but it only brought bad luck to people who drank from it because it had been stolen. So eventually it was returned to Torry and remained there until the 19th century, when it vanished again, this time into the delicate hands of a local clergyman who didn't trust the women of Torry with such a precious relic. I don't know if the story is true, but I suppose the great thing about religion is that facts always play second fiddle to a myth. The final standing stone on our journey around the valley had a hole in the top, and in the old days devout pilgrims would gather at it and renounce the world, the flesh, and the devil, before looking through the eye hole at the top of the stone in hope that they might see heaven. There were a lot of rascals with me who wanted to see heaven, but not many takers for renouncing the world. So I stepped forward and placed my back to the stone and stretched out my arms 3 times and spoke my renunciation at the sky, with as much fire in my belly as would terrify an infidel. And then I gazed through the eye at the top of the stone, and indeed I saw heaven clearly. Because in every religion, heaven is exactly the same as earth, when your eye has been cured of the jaundiced view. In the distance the ocean sang, as it did when Colm Cille first stood on the beach and turned his back on Ireland, just so he could contemplate those lovely waves. And the glen around us appeared so peaceful that I knew in my heart it was worth renouncing not just Ireland, but the entire world for the sake of being there. And what made it bliss, this narrative of saints and scholars, this cosmology of ghosts that we imagined dancing round us as we walked, what made it blissful was that we were real, humans gathered on that Sunday afternoon with so much irony and so little faith that earlier Christians might have burned us at the stake for being blasphemers. 4 hours later, when the pilgrimage was over and we had walked the pattern round the hills and said all the prayers that were required, we gathered at the pub with fish and chips from a takeaway van, and we ate and we drank and we talked. One man gave me a remedy for getting ticks out of my arse. Just slap a bit of butter on them, he said. It makes them slippery and they'll fall off. That's what we did as children when we'd come in from the fields. But another man had a different remedy. Hold the flame of a cigarette lighter close to the tick's backside and he'll go into reverse, middling quick. We may have been blasphemers, but we were real to each other, as much as the holy saints were vivid in our imagination, as powerfully as they inhabited our minds and bent our will to the purpose, as the story bends the heart to its conclusions. They bent us out of time, away from any past or future, and towards the present moment, so that in the end, when we completed the prayers, we were all gathered in one single, never-ending now. The beloved and I had found a new way of being alone. A solitude that both of us inhabited. A solitude that felt like a tent made by God, inside which we were safe. Although I'd never call the mystery of living in the present moment by that word, I would never call it God, unless I was dining out with nuns or people over 80. And there were none that old in Glencollamkill. As we drank more pints, we became lost in contemplation of one another. The chips were true, the fish was true, and the women folk and men who had set out together, come over the black swamp together, and climbed to the holy well together, were all true in that moment, true to each other. And we all agreed that it was only fun, and it needed no explaining, and that it might be worth doing again sometime, if the world ever turned around one more time. And that's the end of the reading. Well, the world did actually turn around again, yes, but when it turned again, there was COVID in it, and none of us expected that. So there you go. And I haven't been back. I wasn't back to do that pilgrimage last year. Who knows? Maybe in the next few weeks I'll get down to Glencollamkill to look again through the lovely hole at the top of a standing stone and see heaven. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.